Hello. Hey, people from Zoom channel, you guys can hear me, right? Yeah, okay. I saw the chat, thanks. Cool. All right. And you also, friends from Zoom, you also should be able to see my screen size, right? Okay, cool, awesome. I'm gonna start then. Hello, everyone. Good morning. So today we're gonna continue to talk about cryptography. Okay, so if you remember last time we played the game together, right? And then we talked about Caesar cipher. And by the end of the class, we mentioned about two classes of cryptography. We call it symmetric and asymmetric cryptography. And can someone remind me what's the difference between symmetric and asymmetric cryptography? Yes, please. Yes. Yes, exactly. So symmetric cryptography uses the same key, but for asymmetric cryptography, they're going to use different keys for encryption and decryption. Okay, and then today we start to talk about symmetric cryptography. We're probably going to take one or two lectures to talk about symmetric, and after that we'll talk about asymmetric cryptography. All right, so if you remember, this is the notations, or say like the high level letters representations for symmetric cryptography. So we have two parties, Alice and Bob, and Alice will encrypt the plain text denoting with M, right? So using like the encryption algorithm E to encrypt it. Oh, sorry. And also using the key KE to encrypt it. And Alice will get the ciphertext called C, right? And then the ciphertext will be sent to the public, meaning that's like if someone bad in the middle, he can get this message. But by the end, that this message comes to the recipient, Bob, which we use, C prime to denote the sent ciphertext. Then Bob is going to use his decryption algorithm, big letter, capital B, and then use his own decryption key to decrypt this message. And a good symmetric cryptography should be either just output the plain text or tells Bob that there's an error if C got changed, right? And for symmetric cryptography, we should have KE is equal to KD, right? And for symmetric cryptography, we can also divide it into two small classes. One is called stream cipher, and the other is called block ciphers. We're going to start with stream ciphers today, and if we still have some time, we'll also talk about block ciphers a little bit. Okay, so the first thing that you might want to ask is, since now we talk about block cipher and stream cipher, what are the difference, right? So the difference, just like the way that they say it. So stream ciphers, like you have a call with someone, or like in this lecture, or now we are having this Zoom meeting with everyone online. So you can listen to me like every word that I speak, like word by word, and then you can just get the entire stream, just like synchronously, right? But then for block ciphers, more like, I am sending the message or sending a chat message on Zoom. So it's like I sent something, and then by the end that I finish this message, this entire message will be sent as a chunk, as a block to the recipient. And that's the only difference between stream cipher and a block cipher. It's more of, how they're gonna handle the plain text or the the cipher text. The one is to treat it as stream letter by letter or bit by bit, and the other is just treated as an entire chunk with a constant size. And then once this chunk is finished, it then send this encrypted or decrypted message for this entire chunk. Okay, and now let's start from stream cipher, as I said, and then also let's start with one simple example of a stream cipher, which is called OTP, short for one-time pad. So OTP was invented by Miller and Berman. Actually, yeah, I mean they both invented it, and the idea is actually pretty easy. So remember that we have two algorithms. One is encryption algorithm and the other is decryption algorithm, right? And then for each algorithm, we need a key. And because this is symmetric, so the key is going to be same. I'm going to just use K to represent both keys, all right? And the idea is just to use XOR. Basically, if you have a plain text like M, the way that you encrypt it is just to XOR K with M, and then you will get the ciphertext. And then on the other way back, if you want to decrypt the message, you can just very easily just have the ciphertext XORed with the key K again, and then you will get your plain text back. So far, so good? Okay. So the first question, can you infer K given M and C? Yes, yes, I see some of you guys, yes, right. Because if you already have like C is equal to K XOR M, you can just get K by have C XOR M. Basically, as long as you have both the plain text and the ciphertext together, you can just recover the key, right? And then once you recover the key, in the future, whenever you got a ciphertext, you can always just revert it back to get the plain text because now you have the key already. But then the question is, if you just keep changing key, so that every time that you decrypt something, you're going to use a new key, a new K. Can you still infer M given a C? Yes or no? Or the answer is just no. So it's like if you keep changing K, means that even though that you can recover K at this point, the key is going to change the next time. So if you have the plain text, or if you have the ciphertext, you cannot use the old key to XOR it to get the ciphertext or the plain text. And in fact, for OTP, one-time padding, it is simple and it has been proved by a channel that it has perfect secrecy. And you don't have to really know like how the proof goes, but you can know that like it is considered as a pretty secure cipher or the cryptography, crypto system. However, there is some prerequisite which actually is a little bit hard to achieve, which I will mention later. But now you can just say, okay, we know that if everything is perfect, like perfectly set up, like key will get changing every time. And then, every time that you're gonna encrypt something, you're gonna just use the key for only one time and just like throw it away later on. Then the communication between Alice and Bob, who are using this crypto system, is actually pretty secure. Okay, and now let's think about this. What about we have a two-time pad? Meaning that in this time, we use a same key for 2 times, but only 2 times. So after 2 times, I'm gonna throw it away. Is it secure or not? So consider that K, so here you see in the screen that, let's consider that we use this key K. And then we use this key K to encrypt 2 messages. One is M1 and the other is M2. And then we get like C1 and C2 all together, right? And then attacker, say that attacker has C1 and C2. okay? But attacker doesn't have K. And I want to ask you guys, if there is a chance for attacker to recover to recover M1 and M2 using the information of C1 and C2 in a reasonable amount of time. And let's just assume that they're gonna just like use English, okay? Yep, I will give you some time to think about it. All right, now I can give you the answer. So turns out that it's actually not that secure. So if an attacker can eavesdrop or get C1 and C2, and he can just use this, very interesting and pretty easy formula. So he can calculate the XOR result of M1 and M2 using the XOR result of C1 and C2. Because, according to the these two equations above, if you just like XOR these two equations together, on the left-hand side, you will have C1 XOR C2, right? And then in the right-hand side, you will get M1 XOR K, XOR M2, XOR K, because you XOR K for twice. It's like you just don't have a K at all, right? So you can get the XOR result of 2 plain text. And that will be enough, redundancy in ASCII that you can just invert it to brute force M1 and M2. Like you brute force M1, and then you can also get M2 accordingly. And then you can check, okay, in this case, then is the K, the key is consistent given the pair of C1, M1, and also the pair of C2, M2. And then you can validate the key value. And then you can have a shorter brute force time in order to get both plain text. And that is doable. And in fact, this has been happened in real time. So very interestingly, so this is a real world example actually for one-time padding. And back in, I think this is, actually I forgot, maybe this is, I think this is World War II. I forgot, but any case, so Russian used the same OTP for twice. And then this crypto is broken by American and British cryptographers, just use the method that we just talked about. So if now you know how to break one-time padding, actually now you can probably attend to a war and really break the military, crypto system. All right, and so far, any question? Good, okay, if not, just pardon me the time, let me just change my face mask. And sorry, give me a second. Let me admit more participants in our meeting. Okay, let's continue, guys. All right, so we just talked about one-time pad, right? And that is one example of stream ciphering. And to be more general, I mean, one-time is just one example. And there are other more examples, but we're not going to talk about that in our lecture. But to be more general, all those stream cipher, they use this structure. So suppose that there is a key, denoted by K, and then it will first expand the key to a pseudo-random generator expansion. Basically, you change this key to a pseudo-random generator, but it's going to be related to the key of K. And then having the plain text M is going to XOR the plain text with this pseudo-random generated number, right? So it's like pseudo-random number, and then you'll get the ciphertext. And then the way back to get the plain text is to have the ciphertext that uses this random number again and XOR it together. So in that way, you get plain text, and also you can just like given the plain text, you get the ciphertext. So you may ask, like, because it just looks so simple, and is it really secure? As I mentioned, for one-time padding, it is proved to be secure. And for stream cipher, it is also proved to be secure, but you must meet the requirement, which is first, the pseudorandom generator needs to be unpredictable, meaning that no one can predict what is the next key is, given this current key. And then the second is the key stream has to be long enough so that it can really do this like bit by bit XOR with your plain text. And in fact, pseudorandom generator, like making it really unpredictable, is not as easy as what we thought. And that's why, for many stream ciphers, basically their major work is to focus on how to generate a pseudorandom generator in a reasonable, like scalable, but also, reasonably secure way. Okay. So any question for now? Oh, the second point, the previous slide. Yes, so D is the decryption algorithm, right? So you decrypt the ciphertext with the key K, and then it should be equal, to decrypt the message, you basically use the ciphertext and XOR that with this expanded pseudorandom generated number. So that's this G of K. Yeah, sure. All right. Okay, but then there's a problem with stream ciphers. So it is secure, meaning that no one can really decrypt and recover the plain text without a key. However, it is possible that someone, sit in the middle and then change the, encrypted message. And then the recipient, if he received this modified encrypted message, the recipient won't be able to tell if the message has been modified. All right, for example, if we have a plain text, I just put a random string over there, and then that is sent to the recipient. So after encryption, which is to XOR with the key, right? Or the random generator associated with the key, you will get this new ciphertext. And then what Eve, like a malicious attacker, what he could do is he could just change a bit. So he could just say for the last letter, he can shift it by one more. So you will get a new plain text, a new ciphertext. So that is a modified ciphertext. And then if Eve in the middle sent that message to the recipient, and then the recipient still gonna just like decrypt it back, it will actually get a wrong message. And also the decryption cannot really tell if the original ciphertext has been modified. So this is the problem for stream ciphers. And many stream ciphers do not have this integrity guarantee. Okay. Yeah, and then that's a problem. And then that's part of the reason why stream cipher is not really like extensively used. But you can still have some stream ciphers, know some of them. For example, one is called RC4. Is actually used into, I think it's 2005. Like it was used in WEP, like the wireless protocol. It was also used in TLS, but later on, it is shown that the cipher is no longer secure. Someone just find a way to crack it. And that's why it stops being used now. But yeah, what I want to say is that stream cipher, although there's caveat, is still extensively used in the real world, but also not as extensive as block ciphers. And now let's talk about block ciphers. So as I mentioned before, the difference between block cipher and the stream cipher is that for block cipher, it will first cut a plain text or a ciphertext into small chunks, which we call block. right? And then it's gonna encrypt or decrypt the entire block. And if you don't have, a message that is long enough, like it's not as long as the length of a block, then it will have padding to make it as long as a block, and then decrypt or encrypt it. And like in real world, if you have a encryption or decryption and you have the key can be, in a reasonable length. So for example, for 3DES, which is still like actively used in many of the payment transactions, it has a key with 64 bits. Oh, sorry, it has the key of 168 bits. And then the block itself is 64 bits. And then for AES, the key can be 128, 192, and 256. And the block is 128 bits. And you don't have to remember those numbers again. Like just know it, and then whenever you need it, you can just like check, those protocols, and you will get those numbers very easily. Yes.
Mentioned that a cipher is secure if the size of the stream is the same as the length. Yes. Wouldn't it be more secure if the key stream is actually the resulting stream was either longer or shorter, or depending on what the actual key is? Because then it'd be hard to actually track what the key is. Because you would assume that the resulting cipher would be is length of the original plain text. Try to decode it, you get gibberish basically. Yeah. You wouldn't realize that you won't be able to break it normally because it's not the same length as the original message.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So first of all, this is stream cipher. So it means that it will do this translation. I call it translate, but it's like encryption and decryption bit by bit, right? So suppose that you have a longer plain text or a longer cipher text after decryption or encryption. Then you have to tell the recipient that, hey, actually you don't need to care maybe those bits, only cared about those because that is the true plain text or the cipher text that I'm trying to set to. But then put it back to stream cipher. It's equivalent to you just pull out those, redundant bytes or bits in the middle and then put them together. So back to your question, if we add more bits or bytes and make the cipher text or plain text longer than expected, is it more secure? And my answer is no, it's not really more secure.
Well, I wasn't just talking about just padding. What I was talking about was normally a single character is at least in ASCII 8 bits.
Yes, but attacker can also do that. Can also know that.
But what if you took that 8 bits per character, expanded to say 32, and a multiplier, and suddenly from one character you have 4 cipher characters?
Yes, that is doable. But then the caveat is that it's going to be more expensive because you have to do this actual calculation, right? And no, this is a balance between security and scalability. And now you're making it more expensive. And yes, you're making it secure, but it's just not worth, because as long as you have a pseudo-random generator, which is pretty random, pretty unpredictable, you are secure enough. Make sense? Yeah, but that is a very, very good question. Okay. All right. And great that team asked this question, because now we're just about to talk about the performance for stream cipher and block ciphers. And you may also want to ask this, right? Because we know that many stream ciphers, they're not really that secure, or they're not, they suffer from this integrity problem. Then why are you still using stream ciphers? Why don't you just use block ciphers? If we already know that block ciphers is relatively more secure, or more integrity than stream ciphers. And the reason is performance. So you can check this table. This is a measurement for 5 different kinds of ciphers. So 3 of them are stream ciphers, and the other 2 are block ciphers. If you look at this throughput numbers, it means that the number, the number of bits, and here it's just it's shaped in the unit of megabyte, right? So that's the number of output that they can have per second. And you see here that for RC4 and the other, two, SASA and SOSMILA, these three ciphers, they're all faster than block ciphers. And especially if you compare this, like the fastest from stream versus the slowest from block ciphers, it is big difference. So that's the reason why for some of the specific scenario, when performance comes first, people may choose stream cipher over block cipher. Okay, so right now we have finished the stream cipher part. Before I move on to block cipher, do you have any questions? You're all good? Cool. Okay, now let's start with the block ciphers. And as I mentioned, block cipher is to first cut plain text or ciphertext into blocks and then decrypt or encrypt them together, right? And then you think about, okay, now we cut into small chunks, we do our operation, then how are we gonna link them together to get this entire text, right? So now when we talk about block cipher, I will talk about two parts. I will start with a single block first. So let's just focus one block, understand for this one block, how we're gonna decrypt and encrypt it. And later on, we move on to multiple blocks. And then we talk about how we're gonna link those blocks together and operate this entire encryptor system on multiple blocks. Okay, and when we talk about block cipher, we probably want to talk about DES, the DAS cipher first, because DAS is I would say like the forerunner of the current extensively used AES crypto algorithm, crypto system. And DS was used for a very long time. And it has a very interesting and informative structure. And that structure inspired the later on AES algorithm. So let's start with DES, and then later on we will talk about AES a little bit, maybe this lecture or maybe the next, depending on how fast we are. Okay, so some history about DES. 1970s, Horst Festel designs Lucifer at IBM, and it has a key of 128 bits, and the block was 128 bits as well. And then later on, NBS asks for a block cipher proposal. Basically, the national needs a block cipher, and then they ask, collect those proposals, ask for, different kinds of block cipher schemes. And then Lucifer was a candidate. It was selected in the end, but it was tweaked a little bit just based on the, consideration of performance, overhead, as well as security. And after that, NBS adopts DES as the federal standard. So DES was extensively used as the federal standard before, and by the time that DES was used as federal standard, it has 56 bits of keys, and for each block, it's 64 bits. And you may ask that why it's shorter, right? And because of performance, they want to have a better performance. And later on, when we talk about the algorithm, you will start to realize actually it is quite expensive, like the entire operations, because there are multiple rounds, multiple steps over there. So you really need to think about how to make it more efficient. And then in 1997, unfortunately, someone found a way to attack it. So DES got broken by exhaustive search. DES is broken, and then in year 2000, NIST needs a new protocol. It needs a new way to, replace DES. And that's why DES starts to retire. And then the new standard comes out, which is called AES. And now AES is still, widely deployed, extensively used in our real life, such as banking, web, commercial, etc. Okay. And now start with the core idea of DES, which is the Festel network. So if you remember here, this guy, Festel, he is very famous, well-established, a good researcher, and he designs Lucifer. right? And that starts with this interesting structure. It's called Festal network. And why is it interesting? It's because it uses one-way functions. So let me know if you don't, actually, please raise your hand if you know one-way functions. Have you heard about one-way function? Know like what it means? Or can you give me an example of one-way function? No? Okay, no worries. So one-way function means that it is a function that you can, like do the calculation, do the like transfer from x, mapped it to, f of x. But then if you're gonna transfer it back, like map fx back to x, this inverse is gonna be very hard, or it's gonna be very hard to, infer. So that is called a one-way function. And an example can be hash. Just like you hash, you have a big string and you hash it to some value, but given that value, it's going to be very hard for you to recover the original string. So that's called one-way function. And the reason why they want to use one-way function is because they want, if there's an attacker in the middle, even though that everyone knows about the standard, everyone knows about the algorithm itself, without knowing the key, even though they know what exactly the one-way function is, like the hash function, right? You know exactly what it is, but you will still not be able to recover it back unless you know the key, all right? So that's why they really want to put one-way function in a crypto system. But then for someone that has the key, he still needs to decrypt it, right? He still needs to put it back. So the question is how to use this one-way function and combine the one-way function into the crypto system so that the sender, or say the encryptor and the decryptor, they can both work efficiently. And that's why they want to build an invertible function using one-way function. Okay, all right, and now let's continue. So you may see this is like maybe a little bit overwhelming, but I will explain this piece by piece, and hopefully by the end of today's lecture, you'll be able to understand like how that works for Festal network and perhaps the entire desk as well. All right. So first of all, let's just be a little clear about those notations. We're gonna use small f, f1 to fd to represent d one-way functions. So we have multiple one-way functions. Okay. And here, what I just want to mean that, it maps from m bits to another m bits. And then the goal for us is to build an invertible function using those one-way functions. And for this invertible functions, it's gonna given 2n bits and then output 2n bits. So this notation 0, 1 to the 2n means that the 2n bits, a bit string. And then it's gonna be converted to another bit stream with 2n bits. Okay. And then the way that works is that suppose that you have 2n bits, right, which is a plain text, all right? And then you're gonna separate them into 2 halves. Each has n bits. And then you're gonna use those one-way functions to do multiple rounds operation. You don't have to know what it means at this point. Now, I will talk about it in the next slides. But right now, all you need to know is that it will just like go through those one-way functions one by one, right? And then by the end of that, you will get a ciphertext. So you will have another first half, second half of a ciphertext, and then you put these two together and you will get the ciphertext. Okay? All right, and now let's talk about each small part, which is also called like a round operation. Like in this round, using one-way function, how that works. Question here from Zoom. What does L and R represent in this context? So you can just consider this as left and right. So it's like you cut a string, you cut a bit block. In this case, or say in that case, it is 64 bits, right? So you cut it into 32 bits, 32 bits. So each of the ladder like L or represent half of the bits. Okay, so now the way that works for faster network is that, so let me try if I can annotate it. You showed it here? Nope. Okay. I will try if I can annotate down the screen. There we go. So given a one-way function, this is the one-way function, right? And then given R and L, we're gonna generate the R and L for the next round. And the way that works is that first, let's look at this Ri. That is equal to two parts that are XORed together. One is from R minus I. So Ri minus I goes through this one-way function. And then the other part is from Li minus 1. So these two parts, they're going to XOR together. And then it goes to Ri. All right? Clear? Okay, and this is the formula. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the next part. And then for Li, it's actually pretty simple. It's just like you have this original Ri minus 1, right? And then you just use this as the second part of your next round of text. Cool. And this is this equation. Li is equal to Ri minus 1. Okay, and now I have a task for you guys. Given these equations, can you inverse it to get Ri minus 1 and L minus 1 using Ri and Li? There's a little math you need to work on. I will give you a couple minutes. And keep in mind that this is XOR operation. So if you're doing like the so-called subtraction, it's also XOR. Okay. All right, and let me know if you finish. Okay, let's work on this together. So for first equation, Ri minus 1, what is it? If you look at the equations over here, can someone let me know what is the value of Ri minus 1? Yes, please. Yes, Li. And then let's look at this first equation. So that equation contains Li minus 1, right? And then, so in that case, what is the value of Li minus 1? Exactly. But in this case, we also know that Ri minus 1 is unknown. But we just get the value of Ri minus 1 before from this equation already, right? Which is Li, right? Okay. So now let me just clear all the notations. And here is the answer. So it's actually not hard to deduce, right? And if you draw this as a network figure like this, it actually looks pretty similar. And that's the beautiful part of this, Basically, if you decrypt or if you encrypt, the round functions are very similar. Okay. And now you can probably understand what this means. If you look at this gigantic figure again, basically in every round, you're gonna do this operation, right? So you get the next round, first half and the second half, and then put it together, and then you go into the next round, and then just round by round, and then you will get the plain text and the ciphertext. And then in a similar way, it's very, very similar way, you can recover from ciphertext to plain text, right? Okay. So far so good. I know that it's gonna probably take some time to digest this and then map it into this figure. But as long as you have this equation, I mean, this equation will keep showing up later on. So don't worry about that. You don't have to memorize it. And now you only need to know, as long as you know that this is round by round, and for each round, the equation looks like this, you're good. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, could you say a little bit louder? Yes. Right, very good point. So where's the key, right? Where's the key coming into play now? Now we haven't seen the key. We only know that there is a one-way function. And can I have her name, by the way? Dance. Yes, and then just exactly as what Dan said, the key comes into the one-way function. So the one-way function contains the key, which make it one way and also associated with the key. And also the nice thing is that, you know, in this case, everyone with a unique key will have a unique one-way function that no one can really inverse it. Even though that no one tries to like brute force it for a long while, it will still not be able to get it back. Okay, so now let's talk about key. As Dan's asked, like, where's the key, right? And the way the key comes into play is that it has this original key, and then for each round, it uses like a subpart of the key into the Festool network as part of the one-way function. Where's my mouse? Here, right. So originally, as the standard stated, there is like 56 bits, and then they're gonna expand it so that it will have multiple keys, and each key is 48 bits. You may realize, how can I make to have like transfer from 56 bits to like 16 48 bits together? There is redundancy, there's like repeatance. But like this is the way that they design the key is because they want to make it more efficient. So they really like shorten the length of the key. Yes.
Another option is using probability of the NC system. Just randomly pick 48 the values out of the 6.
Yes. Yes. Yes, that's possible. However, there is one problem that you want to think about is, you know, this is exactly repeatability. Yes. Cool. Okay. So now, again, you don't have to know this like entire thing. It looks overwhelming again, but all you need to know that, okay, there is a key, and then after key expansion, it's gonna have smaller keys, a lot of smaller keys together. And then for each sub key or smaller key, it's gonna be calculated, taking into account the Festool network. And then for the 64-bit plain text or ciphertext, you know that the structure is pretty similar. And now we're just saying this is plain text. And then you're gonna have initial permutation. You just like change the order a little bit and then have it pass through this entire network for 16 rounds. And then you will have a final permutation. And after that, you will have 64 bits ciphertext or plain text. Okay. Okay. And now let's first talk about this upper part, like how you expand the key, how you transfer from one 56-bit key to multiple 48 bits keys together. And here's the key scheduling. The way that it works is that, you have a 64-bit key. Actually, I think this should be 56-bit. Oh, you first have a 64-bit key, but then after the round of PC1, it's called permuted choice. So you change the order, and also you choose some of them out, right? And that will give you 56 bits from the 64 bits. After that, you're gonna do this like round by round, and you see that each of the permuted choice are the same. Like the operations are the same, but because you're doing this round by round, and every time you're gonna do this as the same operation, you're gonna actually generate a different key because that is iterated, okay? So the way that works is that you're gonna use, rotate the key and also only use the 24 bits from each half. So here you have, after PC1, you have 56 bits. And they're gonna split them into two halves. So here is 28 bits. The other side has 28 bits. And then you go through this PC2 part. You don't have to know the details at this point. I just want to show you like this is how the process works. And then you'll generate 48 bits together. And this is going to do that round by round. So every round it runs, you'll have a subkey. And those are all the subkeys that are going to use for your one-way function and also the Festo network. Okay. So now you have all those subkeys. This next question is how you're going to use this subkey and incorporate that into your one-way function. So remember that this is like the one small, like one round of the Festo network, right? And I put the equations here. That's why I called it like you don't have to remember that because I'm going to just show it constantly. And you remember you have Li is equal to Ri minus 1. I use this like red lines. So you see that this is directly go to Li. And then if you look at the blue lines, you have this part. So which is Ri minus 1. And then go through this one-way function. Actually, this one-way function takes into two arguments. One is Ri minus 1, and the other is the key. And then you put them together, you have the output of your one-way function, and then you XOR it with Li minus 1, and you get Ri. Okay? And now let's only look at this part. So let's forget about how we generate Li. We don't care at this point, because all we cared about this one-way function. And for this one, it is this one-way function combining both the Ri minus 1 and the key itself. Okay, I want you to remember this because later on this will become more complicated. All right, so remember that one-way function takes two arguments now. One is in half of the, like bits in the middle, and the other part is the key. And here is how that works. It has actually three parts all together. Remember that for the block, half block is 32 bits. But for key, once we generated, those subkeys are 48 bits. Okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to expand this half block to make it as many bits as your subkeys so that you can put these two halves working together later on. All right? So you first expand it. And then after you expand it, you XOR it with your subkey. And remember that subkey has 48 bits. So that means that after you XOR it, you will have 48 bits over here. Okay? You have 48 bits. And then we're going to cut this 48 bits into 8 small groups. So each group has 6 bits. Okay? That's why here, if you look at those lines, each small box S1 here, you see 6 lines over here, means that there's 6 bits in a box. And then after the Sbox substitution, and the reason why Sbox is called it's called Sbox is because that represents for substitution. So basically, you convert from 6 bits to 4 bits. You will have like more condensed bits. And then after that, you use Pbox. It's a permutation box. You change the location, you shuffle it, and then you will get 48 bits outputted from here. Oh, actually, it's 32 bits output here, because once you use substitution, you already condensed from 48 bits to 32 bits. And after permutation, the number of bits doesn't change. You will still have 32 bits altogether. Okay, and then for substitution, which is Sbox, the way that it works is that you will have, say, a 6-bit number or 6-bit block, and then you look at this lookup table to get the output of the 4 bits. And the way that it works is that you look at the outer bits, so it's the leftmost and the rightmost bits. You find the bits according to the table, right? So that is one dimension. And then you look at the 4 bits in the middle. And that is another dimension, that is column. And then the outer bits is the row. And then you will get according 4 bits using the lookup table. And all those lookup tables, or say the permutation box, they're all public. So those are public information that anyone can induce. But remember, because we put the key K in the one-way function, therefore, even though those box information, they're all public, if someone don't have the key, he will not be able to know, right, those bytes that are transferred or they're generated in the middle. So even though they have the lookup table, they don't know which row or which column to look up for. And that guarantees the security of the encryption or the decryption. Okay? Okay. So far we have talked about, in details how that works. So you need to know that it is a rounded crypto system. And for every round, it's going to do some interesting or say complicated XOR with one-time headings operations together. But the nice thing is that the design of the festival network make encryption and decryption very similar. That's why it is very handy. And then for each time of this like generation of one-time one-way function, it uses multiple rounds like the Sbox and permutation box all combining together so that you will get the output of the one-way function. And that guarantees that it's going to be very hard for you to look back to recover the original value of the argument of the one-way function, because you don't know what the key is. Okay? Okay. And then there is a very interesting story about that. So we know that we just talked about the Sbox, right? So it is converted from a 56 bits, or say the 6 bits, to a 4 bits output. And you may just wonder, why is it designed in this way? I'm not going to talk about why, but if you're interested in it, you can just Google it. There is a reason why they designed this table like in this way. Why for this output, outer bits, and for that in the middle bits, it generates to this particular value. And originally, when the Sbox was proposed and designed through the DAS, proposal, you remember that in NSA or NIST that they asked for a standard encryption or crypto system, right? So at the beginning, when the Sbox was designed and proposed, it's different from the Sbox that we see it right now. The proposer or the inventor didn't have any clue why they changed the Sbox. But then later on, like 10 years after, to 1990s, someone discovered a specific attack. It's called differential attack that can attack the Sbox with the different values of Sbox. So that comes to attention to the inventor of DAS, because the inventor realized that actually the original old Sbox that they proposed before can be pretty bad, can suffer pretty severe to the differential cryptanalysis. However, the new Sbox that is used in the end doesn't suffer too much from differential cryptanalysis. So there is huge, there is like people just like passing around those news that they thought that maybe NSA or IBM already know about this attack a long time before, but NSA just keep it secret. And then actually, in fact, that let me just read this real quick because I can't remember these details, and I'm not a very good storyteller. So IBM Watson researchers discovered differential crypto analytic attacks in 1974, and then were asked by the NSA to keep the technique secret. Okay, and then Coppersmith explains IBM's secrecy decision by saying that was because this attack can be a very powerful tool used against the many schemes, and there was concern that such information in the public domain could adversely affect national security. So NSA asked us to stamp all our documents confidential. We actually put a number on each one and lock them up in safes because they were considered US government classified. But then in 1990s, someone rediscovered this attack again. And then this original secret about the first time discovery of this attack comes out of the water. And that's the story about that. So given this, now you know that this Sbox is really specific and special designed to be robust to a certain types of attacks. However, even though that the Sbox is kind of robust to those specific attack, differential attacks, there's still other ways they can attack us. So that's the reason why that's retired in, I think maybe 2000, right? And that comes to a new crypto system is called AES. Before I talk about AES, let's still talk about DES first. So how can we attack DES? Okay, and let's talk about the attacker model first. Let's just assume or say, let's just be clear about attacker's ability, what can attacker can get and what can attacker do, all right? So let's suppose that we're using DES as the cipher. We're gonna use this as the crypto system, all right? And then everyone is cleared about the encryption and decryption algorithm, including the Sbox, the Pbox, and so on there. Every bit's there clear. But you don't know the key. Like as an attacker, you have no idea about the key, but you have the ciphertext and the plain text pairs. So you can know like many ciphertext and then many corresponding plain text, but you still just don't know about the key. And the question is that, can you use a brute force way to get the key? And also, can you use a relatively, feasible, like not that expensive way to get the key given the plain text and the ciphertext? And then let's just assume that, of course, attacker has to be very smart. That's why we are here talking about this smart attack, right? And this is so-called known plain text attack, meaning that you know about the plain text, you know about the ciphertext, you know about the pairs among them, right? Like you know a bunch of pairs, and then your goal is to recover the key so that you can know all the plain text or all the ciphertext in the future, or you can also impersonate someone attacking the other people sending around ciphertext or decipher like plain text, okay? All right, so the way that it works is that we can use the so-called exhaustive search, just like brute force, to get the value, basically. So for a single plain text, can there be two keys that make this two encryption different? Or can there be a key that makes this two the same? Okay, so the answer is you can just like enumerate the key value in order, and then if you already have this like pairs of ciphertext and plaintext, you can just try those key value one by one, and as long like one by one until you find a specific key that can make all those pairs consistent. And then as long as you find the key, you enumerate the key, then you will get to the right key. Okay, so you can brute force to find the key. And thanks to our modern technology, actually brute forcing the key is not that hard. So actually, if you so like if you back to 2006 already, if you have a modern computer and then you use the algorithm that can brute force the key, you only need 7 days you can get the key. And as we know that this is block cipher, we're not going to change the key all the time. So it's going to be like 7 days is not expensive. It's actually pretty economic to recover the key if that key has been extensively used in scenarios like like militaries or wars, etc. So it can be very cheap that you can find the key. And that's why DES is dangerous or is insecure and no longer be used. And then the question is, in this case, that can we make it 2 DES? Meaning that we have a plain text, okay? We encrypt it, and then we get the new ciphertext, and then we put that into the network to the DES again. So you have like a second encrypted, 2-time encrypted ciphertext, okay? In this case, is 2 DES secure or not? Okay, and then I'm gonna stop here and have you guys to think about that. You can also Google it if you're interested, and then we're gonna talk about whether or not this is secure, and if it's not, well, of course the answer is not secure, right? That's why we're here. And then we can talk about how to attack it next time. Okay, cool.
Okay.